I've had a very busy week, which ended with being very sick. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about it because of my experience this last little bit and kind of how things are changing for me and, in a way, changing for the podcast. So stick with me. We'll talk a little bit about it. See you in a bit. So welcome back to the Welsh History Podcast. This is our Freeform edition. And this one's a little different. This is more of a travel log, if I want to call it that. Just a discussion point to talk a little bit about what's gone on for me the last little while. And not this last week, but the week previous, I actually flew to England. I spent time in London and in North England for a couple different reasons. And in the progress, met up with some friends who live in the eastern half of England and spent some time over on that side. And then went to North England, up to Sunderland and Newcastle, which was an area I hadn't ever been to before. So that was great. Met up with a friend of mine I met in Cardiff who I hadn't talked to in years. And that was really great, seeing that area for the first time, kind of getting to know the people around there a little bit. It was really good. Went out to watch a football game out there, and then watched an NFL game on the Sunday. Unfortunately, in the meantime, at some point, probably on the airplane, I would assume, I started to get a cold, which then hung on for the next week, basically, after that. And I got sicker and sicker as I was over there, which made for a very miserable end of that trip. And by the time I got back to Canada last week, it was kind of rough. And I spent an extra day at home because nobody wanted to be around me at work. And so that part of it was not ideal. Don't recommend. Tempted. I see people wear masks when they're on these planes, and I think about it occasionally, but I'll be honest, that's never happened to me before. I've flown quite a bit over the years because of work and other things. And yeah, it's the first time I've ever actually gotten sick from a flight. But things I can speak on. One, the flight itself, flying economy is still not the greatest flight in the world. This is my second flight this year, and the economy flights are hard to sleep. That's my biggest problem. And I think I might have mentioned this before, but it's difficult. I did get about an hour. It wasn't ideal, but it was okay. Plane food was fine. Everything else was okay. The flight itself was fine. Got to Heathrow Airport for the first time in my life, which was interesting. Every other time it's been Gatwick, but for some reason, this flight is Heathrow. Riding the tube was interesting, again, in part because so the city in which I live in now, there's a ton of construction going on. Every street feels like it has some sort of construction. Every bridge, every corner, every turn, be it because of public transport construction or other construction. And so going to London and suddenly running into tube delays and construction and retrofitting, and oh my goodness, it felt like I was back at home. And got delayed on the train a couple of times, and that was fun. And then, of course, rode the train up to the eastern side of England, which was an area I've never been to before. Went up farther north than I've ever been in England, which was interesting. As I said, spent some time near Hull. That was cool. Never been there before. The one thing I will say is I didn't see a lot of history, which is unfortunate, but it's just too much going on in too short of a time period. I wasn't even there a week, so it was hard to kind of, I spent 2 days flying, so I really didn't get an opportunity to spend a whole lot of time. So I guess it was like a 4-day trip in effect, because I got in on a Wednesday and was gone by Monday morning. So didn't really have time to adjust. The day of trying to deal with changing time zones took about a day to kind of resolve itself. So that in and of itself was kind of a pain in the butt. And so it wasn't quite the same feeling I get when I get to have my own time to go and kind of do what I want a bit more. I was on a deadline and had to make moves quickly and couldn't afford to just sit around and twiddle my thumbs. So it was time consuming in that respect, but I think it was good. It helped me to get some stuff done because of that. It would have been nice to see a bit more historic stuff, but I think the missed opportunity I had was an opportunity. If I could have been able to do it, if I got up there quicker, I think I would have gone and tried to see the Hadrian's Wall and kind of the museums over there. But unfortunately, that just wasn't possible based on the time frame I had. So it kind of made things a little tricky in that respect. I will say I love riding trains. Trains to me are one of my favorite types of public transportation. It's just so much quicker in general. It feels like you're traveling, but you're not. You're not stressing out with dealing with driving. You're not dealing with buses that are slower and taking a lot longer to get anywhere. You can get pretty far pretty quickly. It's not as quick as maybe a car might be at times, but by comparison, it's reasonable enough. You're not like, the differences are like maybe 45 minutes to an hour instead of like 6 or 7 hours, depending on the circumstance. And so for me, trains have always been great, and I love traveling by train in Britain. I know it's not necessarily the cheapest methodology. In that respect, it's kind of one of those things where you have to make some decisions in advance, kind of know where you're going, have everything kind of locked in right from the beginning, which for me is something that I try and do before I go. I ended up buying a Europara Brit Rail pass, which made things a lot more easy because I could travel in and out of the trains. I didn't have to buy tickets. I could just go and flash my pass, and it got me on and off of where I wanted to go. And that part of it, if you're coming from North America, I would highly recommend, because you can kind of pick the days you want to use it, and then you can travel wherever you want to go. And you can either buy one that's just England based or just Southwest based, so it gets you into Wales and places like that. Or you can buy the entirety of the Great Britain and travel from Scotland and whatever. So in that respect, they are a great way to kind of deal with those kind of things. So for me, that worked out because I was looking at my train trips and what they would have cost had I bought them in advance. And I didn't honestly think it would be cheaper than buying the Brit Rail pass, which, as it turned out, they weren't. It's just because of the distance I was going. And but the one thing I missed out on, which I was planning on doing, was going to Cardiff, and I just couldn't make it work just due to time frame. So it was kind of a bummer in that respect. That was something I was hoping to do, and it just didn't work out. But that's okay. It's just, so what did I learn traveling across England this time around, and how did it change from an experience I had, say, that happened about 14 years ago or even 24 years ago? How do those compare? And for me, I think the biggest thing is that the economy has changed in such a way that I never needed cash. I didn't need any pounds. I didn't need any coins. I never used them at any point. And so my cards worked just fine. I generally got around by tap, and largely that made life really easy when you're trying to get around a country where you may not be fully experienced. Obviously it's a little different for me because this is the third time I've been there. But if you're coming in from somewhere else, definitely have tap on your phone, because it'll make your life a lot easier, and you're not, having to bring out your wallet every time to find things, which can make things a little bit more secure in some ways. It also allows you to kind of stay ahead of things. You can, it's not perfect, because obviously if you're spending away, you're not necessarily always paying attention to what your actual money you've got, but it does give you the opportunity to, if you need to buy something quickly, you can. And especially for public transport, it's almost the only way to get around. So you really want to do that. Otherwise, it can take up a lot of time if you're having to do it another way. So for me, that was one thing I found, especially taking public transport in London. tapping on and off of the tube is just really efficient. And that, like in 2011, I had an Oyster card. That was okay, but you had to keep an amount of money on it, and you had no idea how much money was on it sometimes. So if you traveled, you might go back onto the train and all of a sudden couldn't get back on or couldn't get off because you'd gone too far. That's not the case if you're tapping from your bank account, of course, unless you're draining your bank account. So that's something to be aware of. So that part of it was great. The other thing is I noticed it really depended on what you were doing, but sometimes the hotels were a bit cheaper the closer you got to the date of travel, depending on where you were going. For me, I saw the price drop quite considerably. So just based on what I initially was going to pay versus what I did pay, I actually canceled my original reservation because I actually found a cheaper stay at the very same place, like 3 weeks after I booked it the first time. So those kind of things are something to keep yourself in mind of if you're coming over and you're looking for something. And I would actually argue it's probably the same coming the other way. If you're coming over to North America, you're going to want to investigate those things. Of course, the one thing you won't have is the public transport system that you can rely on. Because while most major cities have got a decent public transport system, you don't have a city to city one necessarily. And the train system is really not constructed in a method that really makes it inexpensive. So I would suggest that would be a big change. I mean, the other thing is too, obviously, for me, I was lucky. The places I had to go that didn't have access to public transport, I had a friend who drove me there. So that was the big difference because my friends that I met up with, they actually picked me up and drove me to their house. So I didn't have to worry about that kind of stuff. That, of course, may not be your experience. So maybe you do need a vehicle. And from what I have discussed with friends of mine who are American that live in the UK, they say the biggest adjustment isn't driving on the left side of the road. It's dealing with traffic circles. So if you have no experience with those, keep that in mind. Might be something to look up just so you understand how they work. And then the other thing that was mentioned is when you travel on a normal motorway, or as we would generally call them here, highways, generally you're not going to feel much different other than the fact that it's on the opposite side of the road and that things are in opposite parts of the car. For the large extent of it, driving is driving. But when you get to smaller roads, especially rural roads, you'll massively notice a difference because not so much the speed, I think it's more the fact that the roads themselves are very narrow. And if you're unfamiliar with driving very, very narrow roads, having two cars crossing each other, one going one way, one going the other, can be very intimidating. Add to that some of the roads, especially in places like North Wales, you can end up with a single lane and a cutout occasionally for you to pull over and let the other person through, which I don't know how that works if you meet up where there isn't a pull up, but having never driven in that area, I don't know. My cousin drove me around and it felt crazy because at the time I was so unfamiliar with it. And so for me, that's always been sort of the thing that I would be intimidated by driving. So, but we'll find out because I think when I do go back in the coming months, that's going to be something I'm going to have to do is get a car and actually drive a bit. And I kind of want to because it'd be nice to see areas that I just can't see by train, especially in places like Wales where for reasons that are very political, they don't really have the same ability to get around. And I think that would be something that would be nice to kind of travel the country a bit more. So that is an effort I'm going to try and make next time I get the opportunity. So anyway, getting over there, like I said, wasn't difficult. The plane flight was a little hairy, not because of the travel of itself, but rather the fact that my immediate plane was delayed. And so that meant I was dashing to the connecting plane actually flying to England. And that was scary because it was like minutes by the time I got there before they were they were boarding the second I walked in. It was just lucky that, I was in economy, so I wasn't exactly loading in right that minute. So, but it was interesting to kind of watch that process and I'd never had that happen before because I don't take a lot of connecting flights. Most of the flights I take are one plane to destination kind of thing. But Over the years, they've removed the connections they used to have because they used to have a direct flight to London from where I live now. But they don't have that anymore. So I have to fly to another center and then fly from there. So it's makes things a little bit more iffy, which I don't love that. So I think if I do this again, well, when I do this again, I am definitely going to give myself more time just in case that kind of stuff happens because an hour delay was not great. The other irony traveling air travel is to listen to passengers slag off another airline when you're standing in line and you're sitting there going, man, my experience with this airline has never been good. So I kind of have the opposite feeling, but it was kind of interesting to listen to the criticisms and kind of commentary about these other airlines. And I've heard it back and forth from various people too. And I mean, it's like anything, right? You have your team you cheer for effectively, and I think that's kind of what happened. People were, you know, they like their plane, it's fine, and I sit there and go, well, I've actually had bad experiences. I had an entire flight canceled one time trying to fly down to a place, so I don't love that particular airline, but your mileage may vary, as the saying goes. Um, I think the other thing that was interesting coming back to the UK after being away for so long is experiencing how things have changed in a way. Um, the amount, and I know the political issues. So I'm going to say something right now, knowing that there are people who will have great big opinions on this. Uh, Understand that I know what the opinions are about. I too have opinions on this, but I did find it funny, so I want to make the observation. So, in the entire time I've lived in the UK in the past, both in Wales and in England, because I did live in England for 6, 8 months. Um, my experience has always been that the Cross of St. George is something you buy if you're a visitor and you take it home and you brag about it, but nobody there did. You know, unless it was like England playing football, Cross of St. George is just something you don't see. And then magically, as I'm going around, suddenly there's crosses of St. George everywhere. And I'm like, okay, I see. So the politics I know is driving that, but it's just funny to me to see that and kind of go, but this was never the thing. You guys never did this before. So the irony that you're kind of waving this flag, it reminds me a little bit of Canada where um during COVID times we had a bit of a conflict, and in the process the Canadian flag got to be kind of something people didn't like waving. And so people didn't really put it up. They didn't really advertise. They didn't buy a lot of Canadian branded merch to wear around because there was this whole idea that it was somehow bad to do. Now, again, politics have a lot to do with it. And some of the politics I disagreed with, some of the politics, it's hard not to agree with. And I get it. And then with the current situation with the United States, all of a sudden everybody's happy to wave their Canadian flags again. And they're all out and proud. So like I said, with the whole Cross St. George thing, I get what's going on. I find it funny. I'm not gonna lie because I've never seen it before. Because in Wales, you see the Welsh flag. That's just not something you don't see. Most public buildings will have a Welsh flag. Most uh, sites of historical value will have Welsh flags. It's just normal to see the Welsh flag. I happen to be biased. I think the Welsh flag is the best flag in the world. So I don't have a problem with that. I think the Cross of St. George is personally boring, but that's neither here nor there. I consider the Union Jack to be the better flag in that respect, and that used to be what you would see everywhere. Now you see it, but it's not quite as vivid. But seeing them around, I was just reminded of visiting America and how often you see the American flag, at least in the past when I was going around. And then I actually remarked to my son, I was surprised last year traveling down there, actually seeing very few American flags. And this was in areas where you would think American flags would be everywhere. So it was kind of interesting to see the dichotomy between the two and how strange that all was. And I don't know, to me, when you're using a flag in your own country to mark your opinion on something, I don't know if that's the most valuable thing to do, but I'm not here to judge people necessarily, but I just don't, I don't love the association of trying to argue a particular thing because it usually doesn't come across very well. And like I said, I saw what happened in our own country in this regard, so I don't want to make a lot of commentary about it in this case because I know what's driving it. I don't necessarily agree with what's driving it, but there you go. And if you want to find out more, check out other other podcasts than mine. There are a lot of better podcasts that talk about these things, and I do try to avoid politics for the most part because I just don't want to get involved with it. And that's not what you're here for, so I don't really want to get in the depth of it, especially when I'm someone who's not inside, and so I don't have the full understanding of everything. Although I would argue that in some cases I kind of do, just because I follow very closely on issues, especially in Wales. So I do understand the politics there a lot better than I probably would if it wasn't for that fact. Um, but it doesn't mean that me talking about it is a big deal. Like, I could go on about the Senate elections forever if you really wanted me to. I don't think you would. And talk about the right to vote and whether you should or shouldn't, and proportional representation versus first past the post, good, bad, indifferent, da da da. All that kind of stuff I could talk about and I'm pretty well versed on, but I don't see it as being something that I would do for this podcast. If I was to ever do that, specifically on one of these kind of episodes, I would rather do it with someone who has the experience and expertise to talk about it better. And that may happen. I may look into getting to someone to talk about the election coming up in the spring, because I think it's an important election to discuss, and to discuss about just the Senate in general and kind of how it works, because I think a lot of people outside of Wales may not know much about it. And I think it'd be good to kind of talk about at some point, but I do want to do that with someone who is much more in touch with what's going on than me doing it, because I think that's unfair. I mean, I understand it, but I don't think I understand it as well as somebody who's dealing with it on a daily basis, or at least more than a weekly basis, and has a better background in everything going on there. So I think it'd be good to discuss those kind of things. But again, with all politics, there's going to be, everybody has their own opinion, and you kind of have to deal with the fact that those opinions may differ from yours. With all that said and done, let's get back to the point of this discussion. So why was I going to Wales? What's the real reason behind it? I was actually updating my visa. I have a UK ancestry visa, which I got renewed. I've had it 3 times. It's my 3rd time with it. That's the reason why I'm able to go to the UK. And as much as I might groan about some things regarding it, it's been a very valuable thing, and I've really appreciated it. And I've appreciated that the government has kept it when there's been times when they've looked at getting rid of it. I'm actually kind of grateful to the Scottish government who stuck up for it years ago, when I believe it was the Conservatives were going to get rid of the visa, and it was the Scottish government that said, no, don't get rid of it. We want to keep it. It's valuable to us. And it's valuable to me, so I'm very happy about that. And it's more of a difficult thing to get now than it was the first 2 times, but at the same time, it feels good to have it, and I'm glad I have it again. And in the next couple months, I'll be headed back on a more permanent basis to the UK, and that'll change a lot with this podcast, as far as timing goes, as far as what I'm recording, as far as what I can deliver for you guys. That's something that I've really, really, really wanted to do, is to get back to the UK, go to these sites that I wanted to see, be able to take some video, maybe take more photos for sure, to be able to use on the site. If you've been watching the Roman history podcast, I've been interspersing some of the photos from my previous trips to the British Museum and to the Welsh Museum into those, because it kind of gives you a idea of what I'm talking about, and I think it's really useful, as well as getting things from other people. And for me, that's been something I've been kind of excited to get to do more of, and one of the reasons why I felt kind of at times it's difficult to do the podcast, because of wanting those kind of things. I think it provides more value, but it also allows me to get further into the discussions about what is and isn't going on during history in that period. And I'm excited about this. I think it'll be great. And what will I be doing while I'm there? I don't know yet. Still trying to work that out, which is the only reason why I'm not there already. And once I've got that sorted out, that'll then be the transition point for me to get over. And yeah, so that's where we're headed. And that's kind of why I made a jump over to the UK for a brief period of time just to get that active. And then that sets in motion everything else. And now I've got time to kind of make decisions on what I'm doing afterwards. So this is a little bit of a sneak peek into my personal life and kind of what's going on here. And yeah, so I hope you're having a great week. I hope everything has been going well for you. Certainly better than it was for me last week with being sick, and it was quite miserable. In fact, I waited to record this till the last possible moment because my voice and my cough and my this and my that were just so bad. It was hard to actually record the podcast. So this has been the first opportunity. So I'm recording this Sunday night just before posting it. So fun. So I got to do a quick edit of some of the coughing and stuff, and then we'll put her out there. But I hope you all have a great day. Take care. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, or you want to, say, go move to this place or that place, or maybe look for this job or that job, you can do so at the Welsh History Podcast at gmail.com. You can reach out to me on social media, usually at Welsh History Pod, except for on Facebook, where we're facebook.com/Welsh History Podcast. If you'd like to help contribute to the podcast in any way, help me get, some of the financing I use to purchase the research that I do, you can do that at patreon.com/Welsh History. Until next time, everybody, take care, have a great day, and we'll talk to you later. Adios. Bye-bye. Welsh History Podcast is a member of the Evergreen Podcast Network. To find more information on them, you can do so at evergreenpodcasts.com. Thanks for listening.